It was in 1947 that Sri Bhagavan wrote his last poem. This time it was not in response to any request, and yet it had something of the appearance of a tour de force, since he wrote it first in Telugu, but to a Tamil metrical form, and then translated it into Tamil. It was called the 5 Verses on the Self. It goes like this: forgetting the self, mistaking the body for the self, going through innumerable births, and finally finding and being the self, this is just like waking up from a dream of wandering all over the world. He who asks, "Who am I?" although existing as the self, is like a drunken man who asks about his own identity and whereabouts. When in fact the body is in the self, to think that the self is within the insentient body is like thinking that the cinema screen on which a figure is projected is inside the figure. Has the ornament any existence apart from the gold of which it is made? Where is the body apart from the self? The ignorant mistake the body for Atman, the self, but the jnani, the knower of the self, perceives the self as the self. That one self, Atman, the reality, alone exists forever. If even the primal Guru, Dakshinamurti, revealed it in silence, who can convey it in speech? There are also a few translations, mainly from Shankaracharya. A visitor to Virupaksha cave once left there a copy of Shankaracharya's Viveka Chudamani. After looking through it, Sri Bhagavan recommended Gambaram Seshaya to read it. He, however, did not know Sanskrit, so he wanted it in Tamil. Palani Swami obtained a loan of a Tamil verse rendering, and Seshaya, seeing it, wrote to the publishers for a copy, but was told that it was out of print. So he therefore asked Sri Bhagavan to make a simple rendering in Tamil prose. Sri Bhagavan began to write one, but before he had got far with it, Seshaya received the verse edition he had ordered, so he left the work uncompleted. A few years later, on the earnest request of another devotee, Bhagavan took up the work again and finished it. Only then did the devotee say that his purpose in pressing for its completion had been to get it published. Hearing this, Sri Bhagavan wrote a preface saying that a free prose version might be of use, even though a Tamil verse rendering already existed. The preface itself contains an epitome of the book and a concise exposition of doctrine and the path. The last thing he ever wrote was a Tamil translation of Shankaracharya's The Atma Bodha. It had been with him in Virupaksha cave in the very early days, but he had never thought of translating it. In 1949, a Tamil translation, perhaps not a very perfect one, was sent to the ashram, and shortly afterwards, Sri Bhagavan himself felt the urge to make one. For some days he ignored it, but the words of the translation rose up before him, verse by verse, as though already written. So he asked for paper and pencil and wrote them down. So completely effortless was the work that he said, laughing, that he was afraid some other author might come along and claim that the work was really his and had been copied. Also among the works of Sri Bhagavan is a compilation of 42 verses from the Bhagavad Gita, which on the request of a devotee, he selected and rearranged to express his teaching. This has been translated into English under the name The Song Celestial.